So first of all, welcome everyone to this webinar. So we are really glad to have you here, that you are joining this webinar. We have people from around the world joining this webinar. We were so happy about that, and also from different profiles. So first of all, I will present myself. I will introduce myself. My name is Victoria Marin, and I'm a senior research fellow Ramon y Cajal at the University of Lleida in Spain. And today we want to also present this CoDiCri project. I am currently the principal investigator of this project. And I can say this project is funded by the Spanish Ministry of Science and Innovation. And we have also here today in this webinar, you can also see some cameras on. And these are my colleagues from different universities in Spain and from Colombia that are joining us here as part of this project. So I will first perhaps present them, introduce them, because they will also intervene in some of the parts of this webinar. So I already presented myself, but you have here some of other colleagues from the University of Lleida, Xavier Carrera, Mari Carme Peguera, David Aguilar, and Maria Bascal, and also my colleagues from other universities joining this project, Francis Esteve from the Universitat Jaume I, Linda Castañeda from the Universidad de Murcia, Jeff Matur from the Universitat de les Illes Balears, Sara Villagra from the Universidad de Valladolid, and Marta Lucía Orellana from UNAP, Colombia. So this is the whole team for the CoDiCri project, and you will also see their faces here, and they will come also later at some point in the presentation. So our agenda today for this hour is here. So first we will do some introduction to the CoDiCri project to explain what is this project about and what are our main pillars. Then we will have some explanation of how we created and validated our conceptual framework on critical digital competence. Then, of course, we want to present you this conceptual framework that we have developed and also our conceptualization of critical digital competence. And now you will see that you don't have a possibility to switch on your mic or your camera, but we will have some part for comments, doubts, and questions at the end, and then our closure and concluding remarks. In case you want to ask something or do some comment, we have created a Mentimeter questionnaire, so you can always write their comments or questions anytime during the presentation. We will show you again the QR code every time we show the agenda, every time we go to the next part of the agenda. But we will deal with them at the end of the webinar. Okay, so first then I will do this introduction to the CoDiCri project. And for that, I will start saying that CoDiCri stands for Critical Digital Competence towards Agency for Learning through Open Educational Practices. And here in this title and this project, we have three main concepts of three main pillars as our basis, our foundations. So critical digital competence, students' agency for learning, and open educational practices. And here in this concept map, you can see the connections and links that we considered in this project. So I will address briefly some of these three concepts, and then we will see the other parts. So first, about critical digital competence. Well, there is no universal definition for this concept. And here we use it interchangeably as literacy as well. In our Spanish context, it's quite common to use competence or literacy. And we started from a first conceptualization and idea of critical digital competence as a convergence of digital competence and critical literacy, and link to how citizens can engage critically, ethically, and responsibly with digital technologies. Of course, this is the first conceptualization that we have here, but then we will show you to which we reach through this process of creation in this project. Then we consider that critical digital competence is a prerequisite and also an element of agency. Well, agency, of course, has also different definitions, conceptualizations, depending on which tradition it's coming. Here we focused specifically on students' agency or agency for learning, and we understand with this concept the learner's capacity for intentional learning action beyond formal or initial educational context, and also involving this lifelong learning. Also, we take this other definition, which is more specifically for study context, but we consider it a bit broadly. But the idea is that students or learners have different resources that can use and access for doing this purposeful action for learning. Personal resources like their own beliefs, relational resources as the community, their peers, other individuals, contextual resources, opportunities to influence, to participate. And then, of course, the socioeconomic resources is a kind of resource that is not so common or not so typically studied in this literature, but it's also important to consider this background for the students. And all of these resources are interrelated and connected to influence agency. And then the third pillar or the third concept is open educational practices. And this is one of the main elements of the open education movement, who is not new, has a long tradition about making broader access and make things and with different kind of licenses that gives people the opportunity to openly use materials, reuse, and so on. This open educational resource is also part of this movement. But here we focus on open educational practices as a driver for digital university, as also said by the European Commission in 2022. And we use this definition. These are collaborative practices that include the creation, use, and reuse of open educational resources, but also these pedagogical practices that employ participatory technologies, use of social networks for interaction, peer learning, knowledge creation, learner empowerment. So we consider in this project that these practices favor agency. And then we think, we pose in this project that we want to create this kind of practices to work specifically on critical digital competence for improving agency. So this is more or less the basis for the project. And said that, I will also add that this project is, takes place for 3 years. Now we are more or less in the middle of the project. And this is the main objective that we posed for the project: design, implement, and validate a pedagogical reference framework for the development of open educational practices for higher education that contribute to the development of students' critical digital competence, and that by explicitly promoting the exercise of agency for learning. So basically, it's the connection of these 3 concepts that I was explaining before. And we pose 3 different specific objectives. So first of all, establishing the basis of critical digital competence for agency for learning and the connection with open education in higher education. We also had this exploration of current situation in the Spanish university system, where we are going to apply these practices. The second one is about designing, developing, implementing, and evaluating open educational practices that work on critical digital competence for agency in higher education. And the last one, the third one, is about creating and validating design instruments based on the evidence obtained from these implementations from this specific objective 2. So at this point, we are working in specific objective 2, but this webinar is part of the specific objective 1, where we are going to present one of the main outcomes of this specific objective 1, that is this conceptual framework on critical digital competence. So having said that, with this presentation, with this introduction to the project, I would like to give the floor to my colleague, Linda, to explain the creation of this conceptual framework.
Thank you, Victoria. Hello, everybody. In this part of the presentation, we are going to tell you how was the methodology that we followed to create this conceptual framework on critical digital competence. The first thing that I have to say is that we have, next please, This conceptual framework is based on the methodology that we have used is basically grounded theory. We try to create a strong foundation for trying to build on the top of it. But basically, starting doing a grounded theory based on some helps with technology, some helps of hands-on workshops, and also some help with a lot of literature. So this grounded theory is based on three main literature reviews, systematic literature reviews that we have developed, we have conducted in this first part of the project. We have focused on the three main topics that Victoria present before: the critical digital competence, agency for learning, and open educational practices. We, after the first, after the collection of the literature review, we have completed a sample of 144 studies for critical digital competence, 84 studies about agency in for learning, and 101 about open educational practices. With those, with the base on those literature reviews, we have started the part of coding. We have coded all this. All these papers. It's a lot of papers that we have done. But first of all, we are looking for basically three main things. We wanted to create three main reports. Yeah, a report that tell us about the definitions of each concept. We were defining the concepts and different elements that constitute those elements. Also, the pedagogical justifications and the pedagogical implications of those elements, the educational implications, and also what are the intersections between those elements in two groups of two or the three of them at the same time. For that, we have created a method or a process that takes 4 phases. 4 phases for developing this framework. In the first phase, we prepare the data, we organize the work rules, we decided how we're going to work, and we establish a first coding rules for a framework. More than the coding that we were developing in other phases as well, the rules of the coding. Then in the second phase, we start with the initial coding development. We create an initial coding set and we test it and refine it among all the members of the team. In the third phase, I think it was one of the most complex because it was the coding process itself. We did basically 3 cycles. We used MaxQDA for this, and we used 3 cycles in MaxQDA, 3 cycles of work. In the first part, we code the segments of the papers according to the initial coding, yeah, to the initial definitions, questions about education, and practices, and also intersections. But in the second cycle, we try to adjust all this coding regarding of our mutual observations of the coding, and then in the third cycle, we try to create subcodes. And how we create subcodes? We were working in mini groups, in other groups inside the team. We were working with the segments that we have already coded, and we decided to look for what were the subcodes that we could found there. For that, we first started working personally, the people that were there. And then, after a first approach, we asked to the AI assist of MaxQDA about their perception of the machine, about what would be the subcodes that we could use. So after some iterations with this AI assist, we created a mixed. The humans take the control again, and we created the subcode list, and then we make this final coding with the subcodes that we have already created. Finally, we're in the phase 4, we used with all this coding that we have created and all the relationships that we have found, we make an in-person workshop in Lleida, all of us in Lleida working with all these codings and those relationships, trying to work by groups as well, and try to see the relationships, and to analyze how those relationships were more significant for us, not only from the technical point of view, how much the machine says or the tool says that is important, this relationship, but how, from our point of view, especially from the educational point of view, are those relationships important. With this first creative coding that we did, and the mapping that we create with all those codes and all those segments and all those relationships, we then back in home, we continue working, creating a conceptual map, developing all the relationships. That is basically the base of our conceptual framework, and that you can see in the next slide. So as you can see in this slide, well, it's quite big complex. You cannot imagine how we were working physically with all these concepts, but it was fun. It was very interesting. It was impressively interesting. And we have tried to make sense of all those concepts that we found around critical digital competence, but that were also related to agency and also related to open educational practices, to make this framework a reality. So this is the story.
Okay, I think it's my turn. Hi, good afternoon or morning, it depends. I will be explaining the evaluation of the conceptual framework that Linda introduced earlier. This evaluation, if you can show the slide. Okay, thank you. This evaluation was conducted using a Delphi panel across different stages. As you can see in the slide, first, the systematic literature review helped us identify experts in critical digital competence who participated in the Delphi study. So in the first round, held from July to September, we collected participants' backgrounds related to the concept and asked them to evaluate the conceptual framework. And based on their feedback, we added elements, reformulated parts of the framework, improve especially the visual representation, so resulting in the creation of the second version of the framework. The second round lasted 2 months, and in this part, our goal was to reach an agreement on a tentative definition of critical digital competence, add any missing elements and improve readability. So at this stage, some minor improvements were made, and we have the opportunity to further enhance the visual representation. Please, if you can, thank you. So as you can see in the slide, in this first round of validation, we count with the help of 12 experts with diverse backgrounds, professors, postdoctoral researchers, and one librarian who participated in the evaluation. As we show in the visual, thank you. These participants have an average of 9 years of experience with critical digital competence or related concepts. Please, next slide. Thank you, Victoria. As shown in the slide, most experts found that the key components of critical digital competence were identified, and they understood that the framework's purpose and objectives were clear. The majority also considered that the framework was important and useful, as is illustrated in the graphics, especially at the bottom of the slide. Please, Victoria. Thank you. The experts also found the framework comprehensive, but identified a room for improvement in terms of readability. This implies that the visual representation of the framework needed further enhancement. Please, next. Okay. In the second round, 10 out of the 12 initial experts provide us feedback. And as I saw in the graphic, please, okay. In terms, using a Likert scale from 1 to 5, the mean score for all the changes made to the framework was high, with scores of almost all the items analyzed above 4.5. And next, please. And also the level of agreement after the changes made to the framework also averaged 4.5. So in general terms, this is just briefly the evaluation of the framework we did in the framework. So I give the floor, I think, to Maika. Maika or Victoria?
Yes. Yes, to Maika. Thank you, Sara. And now we have 15 minutes where I can explain you the conceptualization of critical digital competence and its conceptual framework. I remember you again that after that we will have some time where we will give you the opportunity to make any comments, doubts, and questions about it. After all this process of validation that Sara explained, we develop also a conceptualization of the concept of critical digital competence because we did not found one universal conceptualization in the literature, and we consider important for the project to have our own definition. This definition was validated with the second round of experts. This leads us to the definition derived from this project of critical digital competence. We use this term to refer to the confident, analytical, ethical, safe, and responsible understanding and use of digital technologies as value-laden tools for learning, work, and participation in society, rather than neutral entities. The second part we show you in the slide extends the previous definition of critical digital competence. This competence involves understanding the social, technical, and informational dimensions of digital technology, as well as the evaluation of its impact on individual and collective practices. And it also empowers people and communities to be able to act positively in a digital world. And in the third paragraph, we describe the elements integrated in this competence from our conceptualization. A blend of knowledge, skills, and attitudes that include the ability and willingness to critically reflect on and evaluate the digital environment, critical thinking skills to skeptically approach and interrogate tools, interfaces, and other affordances in digital spaces, the ability to use digital tools to communicate effectively, as well as to locate and discern credible information and sources and analyze them for bias. It also includes the ability to create, and remix digital content in socially responsible and in transformative ways, and developing creative skills for learning and expression. Going to next slide. This figure we show you now is the outcome of the creation and validation process we explained before, after the visual improvement made with the support of a graphic designer. The conceptual framework on critical digital competence, developed and validated, describes the components of critical digital competence and also its relationship with agency for learning and open educational practices. So it answers the research question, what is critical digital competence and how is it connected to agency for learning and open educational practices? And now I am going to briefly explain the different parts of this framework. The conceptual framework on critical digital competence comprises 3 main concepts highlighted in dark blue, which are critical digital competence, open educational practices, and agency. Then, highlighted in light blue, the conceptual framework on critical digital competence elaborates 5 categories on which we have its components or elements, its aims, the requirements to be developed, why it is important, or what we call justification, and the ways and support for its development. Each of these categories is further broken down into subcategories or details provided in gray under each category. And the orange arrows show the relationship of critical digital competence with open educational practices and agency. Going to the next slide. Thank you. About elements, we identified 6 elements on the key components of critical digital competence. However, they are not completely separate elements among them. These are critical thinking about the digital world, awareness, reflection. This element addresses considering issues, for example, on artificial intelligence, ideologies, underlying digital platforms, algorithms, and online surveillance. Digital citizenship and responsibility, for example, deals with online privacy, behavior, digital rights, and well-being. Critical media production focuses, for example, on creating multimodal digital text and counter-narratives. And critical evaluation of content, including the ability to assess the credibility, reliability, and validity of information from various online sources. And information research, analysis, processing, and communication, which involves, for example, decoding digital media conventions, interpreting multimodal text, and recognizing power dynamics. And data literacy, considering transforming data into meaningful information, making individuals aware of how their personal data is processed, and empowering people to have better control over their data. Next, we also identified 3 aims of critical digital competence. Thank you. Understanding the digital environment, including what underlies it, meta-literacy and self-regulated learning, very much connected to lifelong learning, empowering citizenry and civil participation, which is connected to elements that you can see below and define agency from our conception. And now going to the requirements. This category outlines 4 necessary conditions to develop critical digital competence, which are educators' professional development, curriculum integration, learners' basic skills, knowledge, and attitudes, and access to digital technologies. Now going to the justification category. This lists 6 reasons behind the need for critical digital competence, which are the abundance of information and disinformation in the digital environment, the presence of power issues in the datafied society, and the consideration of social justice, democratic and civic engagement, digital safety, security and well-being, and learning for the future. And finally, about how to develop critical digital competence, we included the ways and support for development category in the framework. The framework highlights 2 sets of pedagogical approaches, one for critical thinking, metacognition, and citizenry, and another for content creation, which may lead to the co-creation of knowledge. The need for policy change, then the teacher's role that focuses on the design of scaffoldings for students' autonomy and self-regulated learning, and the consideration of expanded learning that include spaces and learning communities beyond the classroom. And now to end this part, this conceptual framework is quite complex, as we have seen, and we are aware that we can still further elaborate on it. which we plan to do during the project time we still have. For this reason, we also give you the opportunity now to scan this QR code or use the link we show in the screen where you can find the project information and also where the entire framework is available. The framework link in the Competex website inside the Results tab enables an interactive navigation, but only through the elements which are the aspects we consider need more further description. And it also allows downloading the PDF version, which has a Creative Commons license. And well, with that, I hand over now the presentation to Victoria Marin, if she wants to add any comment to finish this explanation. And if not, to Marta Lucia Orellana to deal with the comments, doubts, and questions we received.
We'll just talk briefly about the next steps, actually, Don was asking. So that's, of course, with this framework, we wanted to use it as a conceptual basis for the specific objective 2, which is the one that we are working right now, the design, developing, implementing, and evaluating open educational practices that work on critical digital competence for agency in higher education. So we are now designing this using the ACAD framework. I don't know if you are familiar with this framework. The ACAD framework helps to think about the design of these proposals in different elements. So we are developing these practices. We are also analyzing different practices from interviews that we did with educators on open educational practices in Spain. So that's something that we have also been working on. And with that, we are creating these practices, these designs. And in this semester, we are also going to implement some of them and evaluate them with this tool that I was explaining before. Right now, it's basically the pilot on teacher education programs in Spain. But if someone is interested, we could also consider other contexts. And we will very much look forward also to collaborate with other universities, even in that, and even disciplines, although right now it's more like a pilot part. And of course, we think that these implementations will help to validate the framework in practice and improve it based on the context, because right now this framework is basically theory. So it's based on these literature reviews. We had this validation process, which also integrated different elements that were not in the literature explicitly, which is also great, but we have not done any practice that validates this. So now we have the opportunity to have this process going through and check how this framework also actually fits in this. And we also have this open as a future work, this validation, adaptation of the conceptual framework in other specific geographical contexts. We have also Marta Lucia from Colombia. We also think that as a pilot, we also will have some opportunity to have in Colombia this kind of validation, adaptation, but we will be open also to have it in other places, educational levels too, and disciplines, because right now we think that it's quite generic, so it could be really fixed in other places and contexts. And as I was saying before, we have this publication in preparation. It took a bit longer than we expected, but we have it on the way, and hopefully we will submit it that very soon. and yeah, I hope if you check that checkbox, if you tick that checkbox in the form that you want to get updates of the project, you will probably get informed on the updates that we have. If we do some other events or if we have new publications, we will share with you through email, through the mailing list of the project. Well, in that slide, we wanted to really thank all the experts in that Delphi panel. We asked them if they wanted to get publicly acknowledged in that study. So here we have only the names of the experts that said that wanted to be acknowledged publicly. So we want to thank you very much for your participation in that validation that actually enriched and enhanced this framework in many ways, with a like in terms of content, but also in terms of visualization. That took a bit more work, the visualization part, but we got this graphical designer that helped us. And now I think it's much more easy to read. So thank you very much for all your inputs and time and effort that makes this the Delphi panel work. We already have the last slide. So if you have still some question or some comment, just please let us know. Here you have always our contact for the project. Our funding, we have to acknowledge our funding always here. And you have also the link to the project website. I see that the English version is again missing from here, but I will just, you have also in the chat, and you have also this link in the email that I sent you before. And well, we are also here in the Competex group, but we are a team of different universities. So we are so happy that you were here today. And this session is recorded, so we will publish it on the website of our group and the project website. So thank you. There is some comment, just please let us know, or you can always contact us later in our email.
And Victoria, Jonathan Castaño is sharing us other opportunity for collaboration.
Perfect. Jonathan, thank you. Well, thank you very much then. If there is no more questions, comments, we can wait 1 minute or two. And otherwise, we thank you very much for your participation, for being here today, and see you soon.
Thank you.